Welcome to the Classical Commons Podcast, a conversation exploring the ideas, people, and trends in classical education. I'm Rob Jackson, founder of this digital platform, and we're connecting classical school communities to the talent and the resources that they need across this country. Today's guests are editors and writers with the FilmFisher project, that which is designed to, as I quote from the website, bring together classically minded Christian writers of various ages, tastes, and theological backgrounds to write in conversation with films, great works of the classical tradition, and each other, close quote. Both Timothy House and senior writer Timothy Lawrence graduated from Biola University's Snyder School of Cinema. Mr. House wrote his senior thesis on how do I pronounce this? Shyamalan?
Shyamalan, yeah.
Shyamalan's. It was actually one of those. I've seen a couple of his films, and so I'm really interested. But you've done the thesis on it, and you started writing for FilmFisher as an undergraduate in 2014. Mr. Lawrence did. House teaches elementary students in the greater Los Angeles area, where he lives with his wife. Loves theology, cinema, Star Trek, and Survivor. And Lawrence taught great books in a classroom for 6 years. Has lectured on moral philosophy from Star Wars, both the high school students and college students. This stuff can be found at the Jedi Archives, and we're going to put that in the show notes. So to both of you, Timothy, welcome.
Thanks, Rob. Good to be here.
Thank you so much for having us.
Like I said, we're going to have to figure out how to do this Timothy thing. So I'm referring to you as House and Lawrence, and I probably will get a little confused at some point in the course of conversation. I'll point and you'll take it away. But first of all, we need to get a little bit of the backstory, if we could, some of the origin story and the development of FilmFisher. Whose idea was this? How did it get off the ground? Tell us a bit of the story, please.
Yeah, so I can take that. So neither of us was present for the actual original, the origins, the beginnings of FilmFisher. I think, as best as I can tell, it started in late 2013, so about a year before I came on board. But I think it was the brainchild of Christopher Perrin of Classical Academic Press, and then he worked a lot with Joshua Gibbs, who was the first editor of FilmFisher. But the idea was to have a Christian movie review site that was that was classically minded, and that had some tie-ins with classical education. So I think the banner used to go thoughtful Christian movie reviews for educators and students. And I think a lot of the original writing team were a lot of teachers in the classical Christian education world, and it's sort of the classicalness of the site has sort of ebbed and flowed over the years. Sometimes it's been more just a Christian movie review site, but that as we relaunch it, we're trying to really hone back in on FilmFisher being this thing that exists in the middle of this kind of Venn diagram of like Christian classical film engagement.
Yeah.
So that's the origin story. My story with FilmFisher is that I started writing for it when I was an undergrad at the Biola School of Cinema and Media Arts. And it was actually, for me, it was the very first time that I had any writing published anywhere kind of publicly on the internet. So it was the first time that a stranger on the internet deemed something of mine kind of worthy to be published. And so I worked a lot as a very young writer with Joshua Gibbs, who was the editor at the time. He eventually, some years later, bequeathed the site to me as the next managing editor. And then, I brought many of my friends from the film school and from Biola's Torrey Honors program, which is a great books-based honors program. So a lot of folks with the kind of film background and the classical great books background onto the site. But the way the site has worked is I think it's kind of had these ebbs and flows where it'll have people will get excited about it, and then life happens and people move on, and it will sort of go dormant for a bit. And so it was in 2022 that Christopher Perrin reached out to me, having inherited Josh Gibbs' sort of position with the site. And we were interested in relaunching it. So we've been interested in relaunching it for a few years. But for both of us, I think it just kept getting pushed down the priority list. And at the beginning of this year, we were realizing, I'm not going to do it. You're not going to do it. We need to find the right person to kind of carry the torch and really be the initiator and to really carry it forward. And I got in touch with Timothy House through a faculty member named Nate Bell from the Biola Film School, and got along very well. Clicked very like it was first try. Sort of like I went into the meeting kind of expecting to be pitching Timothy House on the idea of like, hey, would you please come and like revive this like like dinky little like Christian website? And he ended up more pitching me. He was very excited about doing it, and he had a very thoughtful and very realized sort of vision for both what it was and what it could be, and how to sort of get it back to it. I think kind of the roots of what it was intended to be, which I was really excited about, and he was excited about, and we got Perrin excited about it, and we've been working on it for the better part of this year now.
That's great.
To get it off the ground, and now we've moved over to the Substack platform, which is new. And that's sort of how we got to where we are with it.
I love it. And, I heard about it through Chris Perrin, a friend, and his promotion through his network led me to believe, well, this is something to take a look at. Mr. House, if I may, this is interesting because you got the call from Mr. Lawrence, and as he just said, he's looking to pitch you. What was this out of the blue? Did you see this coming? Was it a total surprise to you?
Absolutely. I had no idea this was on the horizon for me. I had sort of interacted a little bit with FilmFisher over the years. Just had seen a few pieces here and there, and admired some of the work that was being done there. And then I got the call. I was put in touch by Nate Bell at Biola, and I was kind of looking to put my writing out there, my writing about film out there, sort of vocationally, and I was starting my own Substack, was what I was in the middle of doing, and then I anticipated I was gonna start publishing things and have maybe 10 people read them, who are my friends who I told about this,
Right.
And then I get put in touch with Timothy Lawrence about FilmFisher, and it was really strange because so many things just seemed to be lining up all at once. I was graduating from Biola that May. I think it was in May that we had our first conversation. And so I was, headed out into a season where I was going to have, a good bit of time to kind of invest into this. And I was looking to get started in this field, and it just seemed to be lining up very, very well for me.
Yeah.
And I heard, I have had this idea in our conversation that we had, our first conversation. The name FilmFisher had always stuck out to me as kind of strange, and I was reflecting on it in our conversation, and I said, I think it's got a lot to it. It has, you hear FilmFisher and you think fishers of men, right? The passage of scripture, follow me and I'll make you fishers of men. And I thought, well, yeah, what would happen? What happens if we are trying to be fishers of film, and so we started talking about that, and that kind of opened up this vision for what this project could be, what we kind of could turn it into. And yeah, I've been, thrilled with it to be involved with that ever since.
Yeah. Well, I have to date myself. I'm gonna lay it out there on the table, but I remember Siskel and Ebert. Now those are probably distant memories at best for you all, but they wrote for the Chicago papers. They were film critics, and they actually had a national platform before Siskel passed away in '99. They were really a household name, and you kind of got the thumbs up, or whether you should see the movie next weekend from those two. And that was when we'd have to go to the silver screen, right? We actually went to the cinema, watched films before streaming, before on-demand video, all of that. So I'm just really interested in where you all think here now, 20, 30 years later, the state of film criticism. What does it look like in America? Are there any successors to Siskel and Ebert that we should be listening to, or is everything just crowdsourced? We get the stars or the thumbs and that kind of thing on Netflix or Amazon, respectively. So, what's your take on film criticism, the state of, right?
Yeah, it doesn't seem like there's any comparison to Siskel and Ebert.
Not really.
Now, I do know Ebert. I when I first started to sort of get into films and read what other people were saying about films, he was at the time he was still the guy you went straight to.
That's right.
So I read a lot of his reviews, but it doesn't seem like you could make any case that anyone occupies that kind of central place and has that kind of cultural clout. I think there's still good work being done out there in film criticism. I have a little handful of really good film writers who I kind of keep abreast of, but yeah, it's a lot more, I guess, diffuse, I would say, which sort of goes hand in hand with what you were saying about film itself being more diffuse. It's like it used to be, a few movies came out in the theater every weekend. Now you have access to these vast libraries on Netflix or Amazon or whatever, all the streaming services, and there's no sort of one arbiter who's telling you what's worth watching or not worth watching.
Well, how does that affect the sort of activity of film criticism, from what you can tell? Because you're watching film critics, you have a very specific niche that you're carving out, but I'm sure you're trying to essentially measure yourself against the standard bearers, if you will. But how is film criticism evolving in America?
I think what's so different is the way that people go about consuming film criticism now. With Siskel and Ebert, it was like, America, those are the names that you would go to. Those are the people that America kind of trusted to say, is this good or is this not? And to kind of base what they were going to see off of that. And I think probably some people, maybe did not agree with them so much.
Sure.
But you could base it off of, like, if you could kind of know, okay, well, if Siskel likes this one, but Ebert doesn't, I agree with Siskel more, so I might see that one. But if Ebert likes this one and Siskel doesn't, maybe I won't see that one as much. And that's sort of the way that I feel like film criticism, should be used, is to kind of like, you find people whose taste can kind of who you can sort of predict what you're going to think about something, sort of based off of what they think about it, who will kind of give you recommendations that are worthwhile, and that may be because you agree with them, or it may be because you frequently disagree with them. But I think what people are looking for right now, what they're kind of doing right now, is we really want, we've sort of taken from Siskel and Ebert not the recommendations necessarily, but we've taken the thumbs up, thumbs down effect. And I think you see this with the Rotten Tomatoes of it all, where people are looking right now, okay, is this a good thing or is it a bad thing? And it's one of the two, and there's no other options. And so and it's entirely based on like aggregates, basically. So Rotten Tomatoes and IMDb and Letterboxd all have these averages from everybody who's seen this movie, who's marked that they've seen it on this website. And you'll have people constantly going through, and they're looking, okay, what average score did it get? It's okay, it's a 7.5 on IMDb, but a 4.0 on Letterboxd. So okay, I'm gonna judge what I'm gonna see it based off of this, and so I think you're right in that it's sort of become a little more diffuse, and it kind of is spread out across the crowd. But there's also like sort of, we've started to sort of place our faith in the aggregate rather than in recommendations from people, like actual people. We're sort of putting our trust in the mass as a whole thinks this is good, right, and so it's good, or the mass as a whole thinks this is bad, so it's bad.
It's so interesting because that crowdsourcing, right, which the Yelps, or in the film industry, as you say, the Rotten Tomatoes, is both an aggregate of, as I recall, there's two scores, right? There's the aggregate of the audience, and then there's the aggregate of the critics. But again, still kind of a aggregating just what the lion's share, the majority of one of these groups says, and that sort of influences my decision as I look at the percentage that they take. I wonder, because of course the average viewer isn't necessarily steeped in the technique or the kind of critical apparatus. I wonder which of those two in Rotten Tomatoes you would trust, even though, again, in the aggregate, it may just blur everything. You don't have the real idiosyncrasy of a Siskel or Ebert, right? You're not getting to attach to or identify with one of them. You're just sort of looking at this this composite, and that seems to blur something. But have you all found you prefer the critics in the aggregate or the masses? Is there anything to be said of Rotten Tomatoes or similar evaluations?
Yeah. Personally, I could just speak for myself. Like I don't really care about. I really just. I think I see broadly. There's this sort of the aggregation as a way, and I realize like a lot of times like it seems to me like a movie that's like a movie gets a high Rotten Tomatoes score if it's kind of lowest common denominator, right? Like, because Rotten Tomatoes, it's like this percentage of critics gave it a positive review. So that's like above a certain threshold. So like if a bunch of critics thought it was like okay, if like 60% of critics thought it was okay, then that's a 60% fresh, even if none of them thought it was very good, right?
Right.
So I think it's a kind of, I find it, and maybe it's just me being a little cynical or idealistic or some mix of the two, but I don't find it a super helpful metric for myself. And I think that in my own sort of viewing habits and how I seek out what to watch, it really does come to relationships with people who I trust, and that's how I go 100%. About. So I'm interested to see who are the voices who I sort of take seriously. What are they thinking about this film? Whether that be online critics or people who I know personally, who I sort of have built trust with over the years, and I have my sort of little platoon of people who I think have really worthy and thoughtful opinions on things. So that's in a small way it's a little countercultural, but that's really sort of my approach and what I would kind of commend to a lot of people.
Yeah.
I'd say, I'm in a very similar spot. I'd say I'm in a very similar spot. I think one of the things I'm sort of least thrilled with about the sort of Rotten Tomatoes effect is this so-called divide between critics and audiences, and which one do you side with, and which one do you think is most right, and it sort of like boils everything down to like the critics are a monolith. They're all one. Like the critics think this and the audience thinks this, and there's only two of them. And it's like, well, no, but like the critics score could be anything from, I thought this was okay, or I thought this is the greatest thing I've ever seen. Like those are counted as the same thing when it comes to the Rotten Tomatoes score. And it's like there's so much variety there that just gets lost in the wash based on how it kind of aggregates things. And even like, I most commonly use the platform Letterboxd to sort of find movies. But when I go to a film's page on Letterboxd, what I'm looking for is usually, I don't really look at the average rating so much. I look at what have my friends said and the people that I follow, and I look at their thoughts and their scores. And that kind of, I think, is what really guides my viewing and what I kind of recommend to people.
Well, I really appreciate the fact that you are creating maybe a little countercultural little cadre of critics and folks that you trust, folks that you'd want to read. That seems to me suitable, because you're looking to find people whose tastes have been refined or developed, and who who have seen enough films that they know a good one when they see it, right? They can spot a dud, or kind of something that's just rehash, and steer you clear of it. But it might be good for our listeners and viewers for you all to sketch out maybe a few of the essential features that a film should be evaluated upon. In other words, what are the categories that a thoughtful viewer would want to weigh, and what are they looking for if they happen to read a good piece of criticism as they evaluate its content, its form, and the overall effect? What are the categories that you think are important for any viewer to at least pay attention to as they reflect on a film?
Yeah, I think that a thing that I've observed, the first thing I'd say is that I think film it's a visual art form. It's an art form that tells a story and communicates meaning through images. And I think what I've observed, especially in my teaching years, but in a few different contexts, when you have you'll try to have a movie discussion night with students, that sort of thing. I think I often observe that people are able to start. They'll start talking about a film in terms of they would talk about films as if they were novels. We'll talk about the story, talk about the dialogue, talk about the characters, the themes, which are all certainly important things.
Sure.
But I think we don't, although we're inundated with movies, we don't often have the vocabulary to talk about the unique ways in which a movie tells a story that the same story told on a page wouldn't have.
Right.
So I think, thinking about, okay, what story are the images telling, and beginning to learn to pay attention to that if there's a way to do that. I'm still thinking about it, but if there's a way to do that, it's an intuitive thing that happens. It's just being able to notice it and sort of attend to it. This film is communicating to me in this way, not just through the ways that I'm sort of more trained to articulate.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the first things I would, in a very fundamental way, just be films tell stories through images, through visuals, not only through words.
He has me wondering if. Yeah, go ahead, please, Timothy. Go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry. What I was going to say, I think I would say that's sort of one of the things that sort of sets film apart from most other artistic media, particularly other artistic media that tell a story, is that I think film is sort of fundamentally based in perspective. If you read a good novel, it communicates a perspective to you, in the way it chooses its words and the way that it sort of describes things. You get the perspective of the writer or the character on the thing that's being described. But that takes a certain level of skill. You could write a novel that didn't really communicate much of a strong perspective one way or another. But I think film, I'm not sure it takes a whole lot of skill to really communicate a perspective with film, because every single choice that you make communicates that, whether you intend it to or not. If you film just a conversation piece and you're just filming two people speaking to each other, even just in who am I looking at right now, you're communicating to me what is important for me to be looking at right now. And so that communicates importance, and that communicates value, and that communicates, all of a sudden you're seeing through the perspective of whoever it is that has made the film. And oftentimes that comes through in unconscious ways. And so I would say a huge critical thing to evaluate when you're trying to evaluate a film is, what is its perspective? And how is it playing around with its perspective? If you have a certain degree of skill, you can kind of you can adjust things, you can look from a different perspective. But yeah, what perspective is being communicated to me, and what does that say about the things that I'm watching?
It's interesting to me as we think back to the origin of this relatively recent, it's a modern art form, right? In the last 100 years or so, they were once known as moving pictures, right? So the apparatus of criticism, the ability to criticize a picture, that is to say, maybe a painting or a sketch, I wonder if any of those technical features or critical categories could be applicable. I mean, obviously, we'll hear something about lighting, we'll hear something about framing. You know, if I'm watching an old black and white with my kids, I just note how long a particular frame is given to before switching, right, from one character to the next. By contrast with today, where it just seems like no more than 2 seconds, 3 seconds max, right, and that just feels drawn out to the modern viewer. Those picture, the sort of the categories of criticism that might attend to the actual picture or framing, seem to me to be something that needs to be recovered if we're going to actually talk about this art form in its own way. And obviously they move and they change and they shift, and that all matters as well. So, I mean, you've both studied film and you understand the techniques and the tools behind that lens. I'm wondering if that's the kind of thing that we actually need to be instructed in if we're going to be more discerning viewers. Any thoughts on the technique and actually the tools of the camera that have really they've grown immensely, right? Even in the last 20 years with CGI and, you know, moving towards a digital format and all of that. What are we to make of this as the simple lay viewer, right? If we're trying to understand it.
I mean, I don't know. I have a few thoughts I can offer. I think, yeah, I wouldn't say that it's absolutely certainly important for you to sort of understand all of the tricks and tools of the trade in order to really appreciate film. I do think it helps. Having experienced it a little bit, it definitely changed my perspective on films. You know, I used to see I used to see it very much like, okay, this is a movie by a director, and this director made this movie, and so I can understand everything about this movie based on what the director was thinking. And then I went on a film set, and I was like, oh my gosh, so many people are making so many decisions every single moment on this set.
Yeah.
And, you know, the director's making many of them and definitely guiding all of them in a particular direction, but it's not necessarily that way. And so my experience of knowing the tools of the trade and what's actually going on behind the camera definitely changed my perspective on film. But I also wouldn't say that you need that in order to have any kind of understanding of what's going on in it. I do think more curiosity is better always. You know, the more you're seeking to understand about what's actually going on in the work, I think the better. But I wouldn't say that, you know, somebody who hasn't experienced a film set, you know, shouldn't say anything about film.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you. I'm just wondering if there's a way for the beginner's guide, you know, to help those of us who are interested in being thoughtful as we view, to step back and become more aware, right, of how a particular director and crew, to your point, have brought this together, right? This work. Timothy Lawrence, thoughts?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, yeah, this is a question that I sort of perennially sort of chew on. I haven't yet come up with a sort of many clear answers, but I think there's no substitute for. I think as far as like how to learn, I think what you're asking is how does one from a kind of a lay person, quote unquote, begin to learn to watch a film more attentively,
right?
And yeah, I think there's no substitute for watching a lot and reading things that thoughtful people say about them, and sort of slowly building out a kind of vocabulary for yourself of how to talk about what a film is doing. But I think Sorry, I lost a thought. But yeah, I don't think I can kind of point to any one sort of book or essay that is sort of a good primer. I think it's more just for me. It was just like just a habit of watching a lot, reading a lot from trustworthy sort of older Christians who sort of modeled that sort of patient attention to movies for me.
Yep.
And just I think there's a question of a question that I often think about, and that you mentioned a little bit when you were drawing a contrast between old movies and modern movies. I think it is a question of like pace. So when I was in college, I would there was a time, and it was quite insane. I would watch like 3 movies a day because I was like trying to get in all the important movies, and you're not able to spend any time to sit with any of them.
Yeah. Right.
So I think there's no substitute for like. Yeah, it's a question of pace. Like, yeah, you watch a movie, you sit with it, you talk about it with people, you read what other people think about it, and just to sort of let it, and then you kind of allow it to have space to kind of stew. I think that for me seems like how you begin to grow in your ability to sort of engage with films in the sort of thoughtful way that we're kind of talking about wanting.
Well, I mean, part of what you've provided us with FilmFisher is a collection, a community of these types of people who watch film and they write about it, they talk about it, they're thinking about it all the time. And I love the fact that you're trying to identify a group that's various stages of life. Their tastes are different, their theological perspectives are varied, but ultimately, are there some essential criteria? Like, what are you looking for in a good critic, and how do you create a community of such critics? What are the essentials there?
I think I mean, first of all, we're looking for a good writer, someone who can organize their thoughts and present them in a compelling way. But we're also looking for we sort of have a letter that we kind of send to our potential contributors, and it sort of says something like, you should be, in addition to we want to we want all our writers to be Christians, broadly speaking. We're kind of trying to build an ecumenical crew of writers, so people from all over the Christian faith in different theological backgrounds. But in addition to that, we want people to have a classical perspective, is how we say it. And that's a difficult, that's the term that I think people get hung up on most, and that is sort of the slipperiest and most difficult to define. We had some internal discussions about, do we describe it as a classical perspective? How do we say it? And I think what it boils down to is 3 qualities in my view, and it's patience, and it's curiosity, and it's intellectual humility. And I think those are wrapped up in this metaphor of fishing, right? If you go fishing, you need to be patient. You have to be willing to sit there for a while and just let the good stuff come to you, And I think that's how we want to approach watching movies. We want to not see it and finish it and go, cool, that's either the best thing ever or the worst thing ever. I must decide right now which that is, and then I'll tell everybody. No, it's like, okay, I finished this. What effect is it having on me? How is it living in my mind moving forward? So that patient attitude is one important thing. And then curiosity, I think, is huge, because if if film is so critically, if film is perspective, which is sort of my thesis, my theory of the case, then if you're seeking out one perspective all the time, there's a lot that you're going to miss. And so I think that's something we really want to have in our writers, is people who are interested in exploring lots of different parts of film, who are curious and kind of want to learn more, to approach with a posture of learning. And that gets into the intellectual humility, where we want people who are going to come to this project and think, what can I learn? Maybe not even necessarily what is this trying to teach me, but what can I learn is really critical. And we have a lot of pieces on FilmFisher that take very frivolous movies and unpack them in great depth and find interesting things to reflect on from them. And I think a criticism that we could get from that is, oh, you're taking this silly thing. Yeah, I wrote a piece on the Finding Nemo movies the other week, and people could say, oh, okay, you made a connection between Dory and the Apostle Paul, and that makes no sense because this is just a silly fish movie. Yeah, okay, sure, but also, I'm not necessarily even for sure approaching this from, okay, what is the director Andrew Stanton trying to communicate to me, but what can I learn from this silly fish movie? And I think I found, I tried to find something that was worth learning from this movie, and I think that's kind of how we want to approach movies.
I really appreciate that, because as we were talking about this classical orientation, I am intrigued by what that means. So I appreciate you bringing those criteria to the fore. I often think of classical educators probably prone to being in the books. We promote great books, to be sure. And we're low tech in the classroom for the most part, right? Maybe we're not Luddites. I hope we're not. But as you look at your passion for film, you've both studied it, and you relate it to this larger tradition, right, that predates the art of film, literature, poetry, drama, and philosophy. How do they connect? I mean, is there a way in which that's a part of the learning and the intellectual humility that you describe? And if so, what does that look like?
Yeah, I think that I feel I kind of often hold in the back of my mind a bit of tension there. I think a way that Josh Gibbs has sort of a sort of slogan that he likes to repeat about the class is like, love what lasts. That's the classical education is about learning to love what has stood the test of time. And there's a sense in which it's like, film's been around for like 100 years. Like, we don't know for sure if it'll be around for another 100 years. Like, you can't, even the best, even something like, Christian movie masterpiece, The Tree of Life. Like, I love it. I think it's quite profound, but you can't hold, you just can't, from a classical perspective, hold that in the same kind of like veneration as the Divine Comedy or something.
Right.
But I think, and this piggybacks off of some of Timothy House's points, is that I think that when we talk about approaching films from a classical perspective and wanting to have classical writers, what that means is that the people who are writing about films on FilmFisher are coming to those films with a very robust and full perspective that's been formed and shaped and enriched by deep engagement with the classical tradition, with these great books and poetry and literature and art and drama from across time. And so I think you have another kind of phrase that we like in the classical world. We talk about the great conversation. All these books across time are sort of talking to each other. And I think that even if films are sort of in a way kind of like junior participants in the great conversation, I think that what we're looking for at FilmFisher, what I find most compelling is both when I read film criticism, when I write about films, is these film, like, you're putting them in dialogue with people who have come before, with thinkers who have come before, and sort of as Timothy House was saying, like, it may not always even be purposeful. Like, I couldn't gun to my head swear that James Cameron was definitely like really purposely thinking about Herman Melville when he made the Avatar movies, whatever. But the common denominator is that a good work of art, a good movie, and a good art, they're both commenting on reality. They're commenting on the perennial things, the real things, the human things. And so I think a lot of the vision of FilmFisher is like, we're taking film, we're a film criticism site, but we're putting films in conversation with a lot else. And that situates them in a context, a much larger and richer context. And there's a humility to that. Like, oh, like, yeah, I'm not saying that these films are on the same level as these great works per se, but I am saying there's a possibility that they're touching on the same things in their own way,
Sure.
and that they can kind of converse with each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it seems like your site is formatted, and maybe we can kind of walk through it. I'm on the homepage here for those who are viewing. And if you can just walk us through that table of contents, your headers, and tell us what we can find here that may be helpful for our viewers and listeners if they wish to explore further. Walk me through that.
Yeah. Do you mind if I?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So I think this goes back to some of the things that you were mentioning, Rob, about, sometimes it seems to me there's broadly speaking, two kinds of film writing. And there's the sort of the Siskel and Ebert model, which is like and this is where we'd see our reviews generally on the top there. There's some pieces of writing on films that are meant to help you decide whether or not to watch the film. And that's where you'll get like a rating system, a thumbs up, thumbs down, watch or don't watch it. And that kind of writing, kind of by design, can only discuss the film so deeply. If you're going to tell someone whether or not to watch a film, you can't tell them what happens at the end of the film.
Yeah,
because,
right.
You have to be kind of cagey, and your hands are tied in a certain way. However, that's also, I think, so there's that kind, and then there's the kind of film criticism where you've watched the film, you're thinking about the film, and you're like, oh, like what as I parse through my thoughts on this, what have other people said about it? And that's, I think, broadly speaking, that's where our articles would be. Those are kinds of, someone has watched a film and they've kind of sat with it a while as they fished with it for a bit, and they have some. It's a deeper sort of dive into what the film is.
And I've read a couple of them, and you'll actually, in this case, I would say you're going to take a particular director, for example, a Tarantino, and you're going to actually explore his work across time. There's an example of an article that I happen to browse, right? Yeah.
Or you'll put multiple films in conversation. That's another way that we delineate the articles and the reviews. But yeah, so I think I see it as our project, and we're still figuring it out. We're trying to figure out how to balance those two sort of modalities, and that's a lot of where what you see here at the top, the fresh catch, came from. And that's kind of, Timothy, do you want to take that? That's kind of your brainchild. I really like that as a way of kind of trying to balance both poles.
Yeah, sure. I was thinking about it. We're sort of take you behind the scenes a little bit. We're looking at we're going to publish a review every week or a new piece every week, and that's kind of our starting pace. And I'm looking at it. I'm like, how many movies are coming out every week? And how many of those would I want to have a piece about? Oh, okay. Maybe I get it down to 2 a month. Cool. But that's half the pieces in a month. That's half of everything we write is about something that's new. And what I'm sort of more interested in is these pieces that are about, even if it is a review, it's recommending you should watch this movie. I kind of favor when somebody has watched that movie and sat with it for a little bit, as, oh yes, I think you should watch this. And then they can take more care with how they're presenting it to you. Whereas if you assign somebody a movie and you say, hey, this new thing is coming out, Paul Thomas Anderson has a new movie out. Give me 1,000 words on that this weekend so that we can release that in time, in conjunction with the release of the movie. What you're going to get is a piece where someone went into a movie thinking, not, what can I learn from this? How can I experience this? What they're thinking is, what words am I going to write about this? And can I find something to say about it? And they probably are looking for that, and they're probably going to find it in the first 30 minutes, and they're going to follow that trail the whole time. And that's maybe not going to be the main thing that you would actually get out of the movie. And so, like, I think you're going to get lower quality writing, at least of the kind of writing that we're trying to do, you're not going to get the same kind of quality from it. And so I was trying to think, how can we escape from that? And so that was where the Fresh Cash newsletter was sort of born. And the idea is like, people are coming to us, I presume, who are looking for things to watch. They want to know what should I go and see. That's sort of what I think you should be using critics for. So that's what I want us to be. And we have to kind of match that, but I also wanted to balance the deeper level writing. And so each week we're putting out this newsletter, and it's our core team of 4 writers, Lawrence, myself, and 2 others, Travis and Christian. And each of us is writing a little paragraph just about, here's what we've seen this week. And maybe it's a few new releases every week, so a few new things that have come out. So this week it was Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein, which is in limited release right now, and it will be hitting Netflix soon. And then a documentary that was in festivals called The Perfect Neighbor. And then we have another theme of, okay, Back to the Future re-released in theater. I actually saw it last night. It's the 40th anniversary. What are some other time travel movies you could watch this weekend? You know, and so these are some like it's new releases, and it's old favorites that we're kind of saying, hey, you should check this out. And it's not a high pressure, give me 1,000 words. It's write a paragraph on this. Yeah. And so we're just recommending that to you, and then you know the rest of our writing is going to be that kind of in-depth stuff. Even if it's a review and it's kind of being cagey about how much it reveals, the writer has time to think about how they're going to present that and what they're going to recommend you about it. And so these sort of off-the-cuff newsletter recommendations are kind of a way to give you that for the new things more often, while providing space for us to do the work that we are so interested in.
And what are we to make of the 5 fish films, apart from the wonderful alliteration? Should I choose what's under tab number 4 there, 5?
Sure, you can look at it. Yeah.
Yes. So 5 fish. So we have a rating system of 1 to 5 fish, which has been in place since the beginning of FilmFisher. And 5 fish films, we thought it made sense to just collect all of the top-rated films in one place. Just should someone come to FilmFisher and be like, what's something that's like a sure bet? You know, something that someone like praised very, very high. Like we tried to be fairly stringent about what gets the 5 fish rating. But I think that's there. For that reason, I think that was why we thought it would be worth putting up top, just for, if people are like, okay, I want to watch something. I want to, hopefully guarantee that it's going to be good. And you just get all the 5 fish films in one place. And that's what that is.
I love it. And of course, I'm delighted to see my own personal favorite, which is coming up here. We're getting there to the season where we always watch It's a Wonderful Life. And my kids always look over at me in that closing scene as they're gathered around the tree, and they see the tears drop. And I'm not a melodramatic kind of fella, but I'm telling you, that one gets me every single time.
It's so good. Yeah.
So our audience at Classical Commons is made up of teachers and school leaders and parents. And I'm just wondering, as we think about the classical edge that you're trying to bring to this work, is there any advice you'd give them, especially the adults in the room who are trying to prepare the next generation to become more discerning consumers of film, right? Because we want them to choose wisely what they're viewing and how they go about that. So any words that you'd give to the adults who, again, are trying to train up young people to be more judicious in their watching of films?
Yeah. I mean, subscribe to FilmFisher. No, I'm just
no, we'll do it.
No, but I think just something I would say, just, and this fits with the bent, but watch more old movies and look for the movies that have stood the test of time, even if it's on a smaller scale than Shakespeare or Homer. But I say don't let the place of movies in your life be limited to like the the churn of whatever's coming out now.
Yeah.
But I think part of the thing that hopefully FilmFisher can help with is not just like, hey, like, is anything this week that just hit theaters this weekend worth seeing? And also, you don't have to endlessly scroll Netflix menus to find something that might be worth watching. But find thoughtful voices who you trust to both guide you to what is worth watching, and then also to converse with you and to help interpret for you sort of what are good films and what makes them good,
Right.
And to sort of help build out your language for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think even just a few years in film time is a good barometer, like, because so much stuff comes out, is immediately forgotten, is just that's the sort of thing that we classicists are worried about. It's like, oh, is this just like ephemeral junk that's just just immediately jumped and is not worth devoting your time to? But it's like, like if it lasts, if it's kind of shown itself to have kind of solidity, and if there is something there that's worth engaging with, that's worth thinking about, that's a good place to start.
Mr. House, what would you add to that?
So I have a friend who likes to say all films are worth watching, not all films are worth dwelling on. And I think I don't quite agree. I would say, for me, I think given infinite time, all films would be worth at least attempting to watch. But I don't have infinite time to do so. And so I think trying to narrow that down and trying to develop the skills to kind of narrow down what I'm looking for is pretty important. Otherwise, I think you kind of become just beholden to, like Lawrence was saying, the churn of what's coming out. And you want to go see a movie? Oh, well, this is what's playing. Good luck, And so I think my kind of thesis about perspective is helpful here. You kind of want to be able to you want to build the skills first to figure out what perspective a given filmmaker is kind of bringing to their work. And if you find a filmmaker whose perspective you think is really interesting, that's a really good way of going about it. Maybe you'll watch more films by that person. Just this past summer, I watched through with a few friends the whole work of Wes Anderson. And we're kind of seeing his perspective shift over time. And there's a very interesting arc to that. And we thought, wow, this perspective is really worth seeing, worth watching develop. And so that's kind of what we did. But there's some filmmakers that I don't particularly, their perspective doesn't engage me so much, and maybe I'm going to steer clear of those films much of the time. I think community recommendations are super important. You want to build a community of people who can say, people who are kind of seeking things out, but who can say, yeah, I thought this was really worthwhile. If I see that, 3 of my friends have really, really appreciated something, I'm much more likely to go and seek it out and watch it. I think curiosity and willingness to consider things that are outside of your comfort zone is worthwhile, but it's also worth noting that you should really respect your own limitations and your sensibilities. I've grown much more as time has gone on. I've grown much more sensitive to violence in film. And that's something that I know recognizes sort of a limitation for me, and it's not necessarily for others. But if I know a film has an excessive amount of gore or violence, just glibly done to human beings, that I'm going to be a little more cautious about it. And I'm not going to say that somebody who doesn't do that, is doing it wrong, but a knowledge of your own limitations is good to develop, and you want to sort of encourage people who are trying to develop their perspective on film to recognize those limitations and not be ashamed of them.
I tell you what, I'm hoping, because you have this section on articles where the reflection and the gestation is encouraged, that you'll get some more contributors who are looking at some of those older films or the classics, by which I would say, something that's at least 10 years old and still seems to have a story to tell and has done so in an artistic way. You get more of those types of reviews up there. That would be incredibly helpful, I think, for families, for teachers, and those who may want to start a film club, so that they can get started, right? Because they may not have the community, but if they can draw upon FilmFisher to kind of create that community internal to their own school or to their own parish or church, what have you, synagogue, that might be a way to get this FilmFisher kind of seeding other communities of like-minded critics, which I think could be really, really fruitful. So I want to thank you both for joining me, and of course for the good work you're doing at FilmFisher. You're going to give us all the details we need to put it in the show notes, because we'll encourage people to check it out. And the next time they decide they're going to watch something, to start with FilmFisher before they make their selection for the weekend. Thank you, Mr. House and Mr. Lawrence, for joining us today.
Thank you, Rob. Thanks for having us. Really good to be here.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.